Let's talk a little bit about weight bias, stigma, and discrimination. It's one of the most important things that impacts patients living with obesity and also clinicians who are treating those patients. I'm Dr. Sean Wharton. I'm an internal medicine physician and assistant professor at the University of Toronto. When we talk about bias, stigma, and discrimination, I like to make the analogy of prejudice, stereotype, and racism, because everyone understands those words, but they don't really always understand what we're talking about when we say bias and stigma. So think about bias as prejudice, and we all have our own prejudices and our own biases towards certain things. And what I'm telling you is that everybody lives with a bias against people living with obesity because we've been programmed in that way. Even if you are living with obesity yourself, you still have a bias against those people. Let's now talk about stigma. Stigma and stereotype are similar words. If you see stigmatizing pictures of a group of people from an ethnic background that represents a negative impression of them, that's a stereotype that lives in your head, that reinforces your prejudice or your bias. If you didn't have a prejudice or bias before, you may have one now after looking at that stereotypical picture or image. And that's what stigma is. Stigma is a reinforcing either image or a way of presenting that reinforces negative bias. Okay, and there's a lot of stigmatizing images and aspects within the obesity medicine space. And the last one is discrimination. Easy, because racism is racism, discrimination is discrimination. So the idea here is that we know that we're biased. We know that we're influenced by stigmatizing images and aspects every single day, but we don't have to discriminate. You don't have to have racism, even if there's prejudice or there's stereotype pictures that you end up seeing. So we have a choice. As a clinician, you have a choice not to discriminate. It's not an easy thing to do because we discriminate regularly. So let's try to live up to the ability to understand our own bias, understand the stigmatic aspects, and not discriminate. We also have to recognize that people living with obesity themselves see those same images, and they themselves have bias against their own selves. That's called internalized bias, and against other people living with obesity. They don't think that they are deserving of care, of love, of the attention that would help them to move forward with their own health. So it's our job often as healthcare providers to recognize that patients come into us with internalized biases and make it hard to treat them. And we have to be patient with them. It takes time, but eventually when they realize that they're cared for, that they're loved, that they're important, that they're worth our time, that they'll get the appropriate treatment and the appropriate interaction. So understanding bias, stigma, and discrimination is what I would like most healthcare providers to understand and to end up getting there, where they know their own biases, they understand all these aspects, and they can therefore end up treating patients in a much more appropriate fashion.